So it finally happened. Cameras are rolling on Man of Tomorrow, the Superman sequel from James Gunn and DC Studios, and the very first thing we got from the set tells us more about this movie than any official synopsis ever could. Gunn posted a photo on Instagram. On a table sits a chessboard, a bag of ruffles, and a lanyard from a correctional facility stamped with the name Alexander Luthor. And the fact that those are the three objects he chose to tease the start of production says everything about what kind of movie this is going to be. The chess imagery is not subtle, and it's not supposed to be. This whole film is essentially a match between two of the greatest strategic minds in DC Comics history, Luthor and Brainiac, with Superman caught somewhere in the middle as both a pawn and a player. Gunn is already playing with that tension before a single frame has been officially released. Gunn has been pretty upfront about the film's dynamic, telling Howard Stern back in September that it's as much a Lex movie as it is a Superman movie, and that Clark and Luthor are forced to work together to a certain degree against a much, much bigger threat. That framing is genuinely interesting because the first film ended with Luthor as the antagonist. Jumping straight into a team-up dynamic is a bold, structural choice, and it mirrors the kind of thing Gunn pulled off with the Suicide Squad, taking characters whose moral alignment is genuinely murky and making you root for them anyway. He said he relates to Lex as a character and really wanted to create something extraordinary with the two of them. Now about that Van Cool badge. Man of Tomorrow is a narrative follow-up to the events of Peacemaker Season 2, and viewers of that show will remember that Lex was transferred out of Belle Reve into Van Cool, the maximum security facility reserved for the most dangerous individuals in this universe. The fact that Lex is specifically in Van Cool rather than Belle Reve tells you something. Belle Reve is where they put metahumans. Van Cool is apparently where they put a guy with no powers at all who they still consider too dangerous to keep anywhere else. That's a character statement, and it sets up the obvious dramatic engine of the film. Whatever Brainiac's threat turns out to be, it has to be severe enough that the government, or Superman himself, decides the only play is walking into a maximum security prison and asking the man inside to help save the world. Speaking of Brainiac, the casting situation for that role ended up being one of the more fascinating stories of this whole production. German actor Lars Eidinger was confirmed as the villain back in December, and by all accounts, he came completely out of left field. In an interview translated from German, Eidinger described how the whole process unfolded. He talked about genuinely believing that at 50, Hollywood just wasn't going to happen for him. Then a Zoom call with Gunn came through. He recorded his self-tape 15 times in his living room until it felt right. Then he flew to Atlanta, watched the first Superman film on the plane to get in the right headspace, and walked into one of the most surreal auditions imaginable. They put him in full Brainiac makeup, 2 hours in the chair, and then escorted him under an umbrella across what he described as a ghost town of a studio lot so nobody could photograph what the character looks like. He walked into a room the size of 5 halls, stood inside a square meter of gaffer-taped floor, and performed for James Gunn. He said the adrenaline was insane, but that Gunn was collaborative, and told him he wanted to design the role together with him. Since then, Eidinger has been training 4 times a week to prepare for the shoot. That story is great for a few reasons. 1, it confirms that Brainiac's design is already fully realized, and they're going to serious lengths to keep it under wraps. 2, the physicality emphasis is interesting. There were earlier reports that DC was looking for someone with a strong build and stature for the role, which goes against how Brainiac is sometimes depicted as a cold, cerebral presence. Gunn seems to want someone who is physically imposing in addition to being terrifyingly intelligent. That combination tracks with the character's comic origins. Brainiac, in his most iconic iterations, is not just a brain in a jar. He's a techno-organism who has also beaten Superman in straight physical confrontations. Filming is taking place at Trilith Studios in Atlanta, along with locations in the UK, Cincinnati, and Macon. Cincinnati is particularly notable because it's been established as the real-world stand-in for Metropolis in DCU, so we're likely going to get actual city-scale footage of Brainiac's threat playing out in a recognizable urban environment, which is going to feel very different from the more contained action of the first film. Now here's where the cast situation gets genuinely exciting. Adria Arjona has landed the role of Maxima, the warrior queen of the planet Almerac, first introduced in 1990, created by writer Roger Stern and artist George Perez. In the comics, Maxima arrives on Earth looking for a mate worthy of her, decides Superman is the only one who qualifies, and proceeds to be alternately an antagonist, an ally, and a deeply complicated figure in his life depending on the storyline. There were some rumors and fan speculation that Arjona might actually be playing Wonder Woman, which Gunn himself seemed to entertain briefly, but the consensus reporting points clearly to Maxima, and honestly, Maxima might be the more interesting choice for this specific story. Reports suggest her role will be relatively contained in this film, with a larger presence planned for a third Superman movie, which suggests Gunn is seeding a longer arc rather than trying to cram everything into one entry. That's the right instinct. There's also a strong theory floating around that Man of Tomorrow is at least partially inspired by the 1992 comic arc Panic in the Sky, in which Superman organizes a coalition of heroes to fight back against Brainiac's attempted invasion of Earth. In that story, Maxima is actually part of the team before eventually betraying the group. If Gunn is pulling from that template, you suddenly have a framework that explains why so many heroes are showing up in a film that's nominally about Superman. And there are a lot of heroes showing up. Aaron Pierre, who plays Jon Stewart in the upcoming HBO's Lanterns series, is crossing over into the film, which makes Man of Tomorrow one of the first genuine television-to-film crossovers in this new DCU. Lanterns doesn't even premiere until August, which means audiences will meet Jon in a TV context and then see him appear in a major theatrical release less than a year later. That level of interconnection is something even the MCU took years to pull off properly. Nathan Fillion is also back as Guy Gardner, meaning we'll actually have 2 Green Lanterns operating in the same film, 3 if you count the Lanterns cast, which starts to feel like the infrastructure of a Justice League taking shape without anyone officially calling it that. And then there's Andre Royo, who Gunn just announced is joining the film in an undisclosed role. This marks a reunion between the two after their collaboration on the superhero comedy Super. The fan theory that has the most traction right now is Martian Manhunter, which would make a kind of perfect sense. He fits naturally into a story about an alien threat on a cosmic scale, and casting Royo, who plays characters with hidden depth and quiet humanity better than almost anyone, would be an inspired choice for a character whose entire arc is about being the last of his kind trying to pass as human. If Gunn is going where it looks like he's going, Martian Manhunter in this film could be what Nick Fury was in Iron Man 2. The moment you realize the universe is a lot bigger than the story you were just watching. One detail worth paying attention to: the logo visible in Gunn's set photo combines Superman's classic S.H.I.E.L.D. emblem with Brainiac's 3-dot symbol, which in the comics represents the bottled cities Brainiac has collected throughout the universe. If that becomes the official logo, it's essentially telling you the entire premise of the film in a single image. Superman's symbol of hope contaminated or merged with the mark of the thing that collects and preserves civilizations like specimens. That's a rich visual metaphor. It also raises the question of whether Brainiac may have already targeted Earth or Metropolis before the film even opens, and the 3 dots aren't just his symbol, but a sign that he's already been there. Man of Tomorrow hits theaters on July 9th, 2027, and it's currently one of 2 DC releases that year, alongside The Batman Part 2 in October. Before that, Supergirl arrives in June, and Clayface follows in October, so by the time this film drops, audiences will have had 2 full years of build-up inside this universe. The first Superman earned over $620 million globally and essentially validated everything Gunn and Peter Safran were trying to build. Man of Tomorrow has the benefit of that momentum, plus a story that sounds genuinely more ambitious in scope. A chess match between Lex, Brainiac, and a Superman who has to outplay both of them. That's not just a superhero movie premise. That's the kind of story that actually earns the word epic.